that, because Helen's there, I just want to make sure that Helen can hear us.
Yeah, I guess Elizabeth can.
Helen, can you hear us?
I can now. You just became audible. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
All right, I guess I'll call the meeting to order at, what is it, 4:04. We've got a couple of things that we're going to jump right into. We have no guests that I'm aware of. And we have thus no public comments. But under old business, we wanted to have a little history of the Broadway project for the benefit of the new folks so that they kind of understand better what went on to get that built. Christian involved.
You want me to go? You want to go?
I can start.
Okay.
I think the history goes back even earlier.
Yeah, it goes back far, but yeah, so,
Sort of.
yeah, it did,
Okay.
yeah.
It's
It
my
goes
fault.
back. So, but, and I, in the email, I'm gonna volunteer to do like more of a history of the Complete Streets Advisory and all of the efforts outside of Broadway. We're gonna cover all those right now, but for folks who are new, I did want to mention the Complete Streets Advisory Council, I think was formed in 2011 through an effort that we funded, actually when I was at Cornell Cooperative Extension, we got a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant to fight the childhood obesity through policy, environmental, and system change. And so one of our goals of that grant was actually to form a Complete Streets Advisory Council that would be formally adopted by the city of Kingston. And at the time, there was no conversation about pedestrians and bicycles. I mean, we were really having studies compared to now.
Right, you brought the
Yeah.
conversation into the light.
It wasn't just me, but so we've just come a really long way since then, and then kind of simultaneously, Greg Swansea, who was here at the City of Kingston, because he was at the Economic Development Office, wrote a grant for a Broadway clean energy project to NYSERDA. And that actually funded the purpose of it was to do walking and bicycling, better walking and bicycling infrastructure, but the core of it was actually signalization and improving the reducing carbon emissions from cars idling at the lights. So, and he also got a New York State DOT grant for the streetscape. And then, sorry, conversation.
Well, prior to that, he approached the county. And at the Ulster County Transportation Council, of course, we do transportation studies. If the study has merit, we will do a corridor study, a neighborhood study, whatever the need is. If it's transportation focused, that's what we receive grants to do. Greg approached our office and said, I'd really like to look at complete streets issues and on Broadway. I want to make Broadway a complete street. What can we do? I said, that's a fantastic idea. That was in 2013. And I said, so I wrote a scope of work and we evaluated proposals from a number of qualified firms, the top of which was VHB. One of the consultants on that team was none other than Mr. Robert
I
Dennison.
had retired and was working for VHP, so you hired a fabulous firm. And we got the job and did the study and proposed in the study. I give John Canning lots of credit for that. Two-way cycleway on the Broadway. Yeah.
And the original scope was from the existing roundabout, the new roundabout to Delaware Avenue.
Right, there's proof of concept.
Right. I didn't know that the roundabout was coming because of my prior life. So we proposed the bikeway, and the bikeway was opposed by the school board, the DOT. Okay, half of the people that were on this that are on Broadway, you guys went door to door.
Yeah, the stretch from Grand Street to this end of Broadway was not in favor of project because, on the other end of Broadway, we didn't have to take away parking. On this end of Broadway, to continue the cycle track all the way down, you would have to remove one whole side of the street of parking.
Is Broadway narrower on this
It's
side?
narrower, yeah.
In my mind it is, but I wasn't sure if it actually was, yeah.
So on that end, it was 4 lanes before.
Mhm.
So on that end, it was a road diet project. On this end, it was
Right.
taking out apartments. So there was significant opposition from the business owners, many of them, including a hot dog place, Das Wieners, Stone Soup, the coffee roasters. They have a lot of clients who drive in, park for a short period of time and then, pick up their goods and go. So that was really, from their point of view, I think it was a financial.
They believe it, right, they believe it to be a problem.
Well, so
Yeah.
an interesting, sorry.
No, the school board was against it, because this was the drop off of the high school, and so they didn't want anything to happen here.
And they were also just beginning their capital plan.
Right.
And we're
For their
concerned,
extension in the
yeah,
back.
even though there were no obvious implications of how any of this work would impact it, they didn't really care. And they also, I think, felt a little burned that they weren't included on the technical advisory committee. When they were included on emails, they weren't embraced.
Well,
And
they
I think
also,
that,
they also didn't step up.
yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
presenting to the school board as the consultant, I remember presenting to the school board and Reverend Childs, who's my hero. Because half of the school board was saying, or one of the school board members was saying, well, there's nobody riding bicycles on Broadway. And, so, Reverend Childs said, well, there's nobody riding bicycles on Broadway because it's dangerous. If you build it, they will ride bicycles. And he was right. He's correct.
But, there were people riding bicycles. Yeah.
And, some of the things we found during the existing conditions portion of the Building a Better Broadway project were that, this section of Broadway and the other section are 2 different streets, essentially, and they function very differently. Each signalized intersection, I think it's each one had crash rates above the statewide average for intersections of the types. So right angle crashes, side swipes, and the signals that existed previously were not timed properly, could not be timed properly, were very antiquated. And so what you had, it created these opportunities for motorists to take risks. And that was very often the case of people gunning it from light to light to light. And
Four
taking,
lanes, right, 4 lanes, it made it attractive.
right.
So the travel speed.
I was just thinking it's interesting because the businesses on this end of Broadway didn't object necessarily to the change as unlike the ones down here, but then you look at the businesses up there where now everyone is double parking in the buffer zones every night and parking in places that aren't parking spaces. So it's almost like if they had sort of been in franchise or whatever, they probably would have objected also. it seems.
And also,
Absolutely.
There were
Yeah,
there
there were several businesses, yeah, that didn't.
The washer guy.
Yeah.
We went together, he yelled at us.
Yeah.
I had an emotionally burnt out.
Yeah, it was a struggle, but also the business community has drastically changed since the Broadway project began. There are several businesses that came, like I know Peace Nation Cafe, which doesn't exist now, but they came because they knew that this project was going to happen. So the business community on that end of Broadway has already changed as a result of the project. But the,
I have a question.
just,
Sorry,
yeah.
I can ask at the end too. How do we balance as a city the benefits of a few businesses against the benefit of the whole community? Like, how much weight does, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 businesses have on these type of decisions? Like, how can they prevent this from happening?
Well, then I'll tell you how they can prevent this happening. They can lobby the common council and have a defeat. So you have a minority of objectors, because the majority of people are not going to show up. Okay, and there's another segment that will show up as soon as the construction begins. Okay, it's for when you're in the development stage, there's the people who are advocates of the project and want the project, and then there are people who hate the project. So you end up in a situation where you're doing a trade-off between the people who want the project and are trying to sell it, and the people who hate the project and want to stop it. So, nobody objected to the sidewalk improvements, I don't believe. Nobody objected to the rain gardens or the furniture. I don't know if people objected to the furniture. Or not. So those are pretty straightforward. The cycle track, however, was not embraced by, because it was new. And people didn't know what it was.
Well, and what we did at the time, and this was before I worked for the city, before anybody worked for the city, we launched a very strong campaign during the comment period for the Broadway plan. And I think we had like 115 comments or something. We launched a campaign to garner support from the advocacy community.
And we had public hearings. I remember speaking because we were the presenters. And there were some people who were not happy with this. Yeah. There's a few that spoke in favor and a few that spoke against. Any public works project like this is what you face. So getting stuff done, it's hugely, to your credit that we got this done.
Right. And the design process as well was a really interesting side story as well. But I think if I had to do it over again as a planning project manager, one of the things that always bothered me from the get-go regarding our office's approach was that we didn't frame this as a safety project, which in my mind, it very much is. This was framed by others as the bike lane project. And whether we agreed with that distinction or not, it didn't matter because that was the narrative, I think, early on. And that was never the concept, even from the original scope of work, was not to build a bike lane on Broadway. That was not even included. It was to look at complete street solutions. And this was one of the opportunities that the public identified, that we examined. We said it can work. And
one of the places where the ball got dropped, and we talked about this last year, and we got the common council to do something about it. We needed an education. We still do. We needed an education program when we eliminated the signals throughout the city. We need an education program for Broadway. We need an education program for people don't know. People are drivers in particular. And also, pedestrians and bicycle riders don't know what to do many times.
Well, so interesting, something that I keep coming back to this idea that was brought up about how when you put in Woodstock to Port Ewan, you come through the middle of Kingston. And so I just wonder how many people are even Kingston residents. Broadway is like a major thoroughfare that you have people just whipping down because they want to get from point A to point B. And so if you have an education program, presumably it's going out on like the Kingston City web pages, like Facebook, whatever, the social media accounts. Like you're targeting citizens, but you're gonna miss all these other people who basically just go through us and don't give a crap about the safety, about obeying street signs and like stopping for pedestrians. Like the people who on Broadway who literally, you feel their.
Before we get into that.
Like you're gonna miss out with all your campaigns, they're the ones who need the most.
My experience has been that when you do that, and when people believe that it's through traffic that's causing problems, and you do targeted enforcement, you find out it's not with your neighbors.
Really?
Yeah. That's been my experience.
Well, before we get into that, because I think that's also another, you could answer the target audience, I think was larger than just the city of Kingston, in certain ways. But
Can I say it this way? It would have been larger if we had.
yeah.
Which is
So
something we can
before
do.
we get into that, let's finish a little bit on the history,
Yeah.
because we actually described up to the end of planning. So for every transportation project, I learned this from Brian, somewhere along that, there's planning phase, the design phase, and there's several phases of design, preliminary design, final design.
What were some of the changes from the stuff that got like hacks? We've talked about like stanchions or whatever, separating the bike lane.
Yeah,
What are
so
some of the other
let
things?
me explain the phases. So there's preliminary design, final design, plan specifications, sorry,
PSNE and then the contract.
yeah.
So it's preliminary, final, PSNE. That final is when you get your.
Oh,
the other
advanced.
preliminary.
Okay, sorry,
Right.
no, there's preliminary,
Yeah.
final, advanced detailed design,
Right.
and then PSE. So there's 4 phases of that design. And then there's construction and construction inspection. So
And you, the
I-
city as the sponsor is submitting the designs to the New York State DOT.
So I happened to get hired by the city of Kingston when Steve Noble took office and took over the design of the project manager for the design of Broadway, starting with it was actually sort of in preliminary design. And then I took it over, and it took, I think what year did we build it? 2020. So it was 4 years, 4 years getting through those phases, which was extremely long.
Not bad.
I mean, and then we also secured more funding. Initially, the bioswales were not part of the project. We secured a lot more funding. In 2016, I think is when we decided to truncate the project because the initial funding was only 2 or 3 million and it ended up being a $12 million project. So, and the 2 or 3 million was supposed to be for all the way to Delaware Ave. So though we had plenty of public meetings, we had a lot of challenges with New York State DOT approving the project. We spent a year getting an answer from them on approving the bike lane. They were using old guidelines, old bike lane
Well,
guidelines.
they're still the current guidelines. No, they're just old.
But I think they advanced, right? Didn't they?
Well, we use
They
NACTO,
did-
we ended up going to NACTO and saying you can't, the ones you're using are not appropriate for a city. You should be using NACTO to look at this. And then some of that was county and some of that was GPI that did the final design.
Yeah, and we had to do quite a big advocacy campaign to DOT to get it approved.
But they don't like it.
DOT had a lot of guidelines around, so like, for example, the width of the lanes, the travel lanes, I think is 11 feet. They wanted 12 feet.
Because it's a truck.
We weren't going to be able to fit in 12 feet and the bike lane, so the bike lane is now 8. The standard would be 10, 3, and
Five.
12.
Right, 5.
So
5.
10 for the bike lane, 3 for the buffer, and 12 for each vehicle travel lane. We ended up with 8, 2, and 11.
Yep.
And so that was a big negotiation.
And parking is 8.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
The parking lanes are 8, which allowed to save a few more inches that were needed.
Yeah, so,
Which is the challenge of building in an old city.
yeah.
And that's.
So if it had gone down to Delaware, it would have done similar sort of sidewalk improvements all the way down. And like the lanes repainted and redone and the lights all the way down.
That was,
The lights actually were done all the way down. This light, Foxhall, is coordinated with the others.
But
no, it's not.
It's not?
No way.
Yeah, it
But it looks so old,
It is.
but
It was
definitely not to
a
Delaware,
project.
right?
I thought they,
I don't think so. They haven't put the backings on those signals, and I have
Oh,
still,
I'd say, yeah, maybe it's not, because they.
I don't think they did.
Yeah, there was a brother camera operator, I don't know.
I think it stopped at Delaware, because this is my most
you
hated
mean
signal.
that brand?
Yes, thank you. So,
I think it was included.
but that's a good question.
It certainly doesn't feel the same. If anything, it's just because it's not the nice new,
Because it,
you know, structures.
that was always running on a fixed time cycle, because it's broken. It can't sense traffic. That's what it was previously. If it has been updated, I don't know how it's timed with the others. Maybe they could have adjusted the timing a little
Yeah, I think, I
without
thought, I thought
doing
it was
video
included,
detection.
but I'm starting to forget things.
And the
Right,
the other, if I may briefly,
yeah.
the reason why the cost was so short was because the
But
economic
the
development.
the estimate,
Yeah, the economic development director took a shot at a grant opportunity and he got the grant, but he had no idea how much the improvements would cost. Can't really fault him for that, for taking the shot. I was on the review committee, as I am for all the Transportation Alternative Program grants. And it wasn't the highest recommended project because we weren't sure about the funding at the time, but it was funded by central office and all for reasons unknown.
So, I mean, I think the sort of long story, maybe some short, is that the design of the project, I mean, if you can imagine, it was 2013, it was 7 years, right? We started in 2013. There were multiple, and a lot of people say, I never heard about this. But I mean, there were multiple opportunities for the public to participate. There was a lot of negotiation between all of the funders. We had 4 different grant funders with all different goals, a lot of negotiation with the New York State DOT, with, you know, internally with all of our different departments. It's not easy, and I feel proud of the project, of the final design, but it's not, I think I was talking with Bob about this. I think that the 5 E's of creating solutions are really important. It's not all going to be solved by engineering. Unless we can put bikes on one street and cars on another street,
And even then you're gonna.
you know, and so it's just,
And you-
that-
you know,
yeah,
you should take credit that when Complete Streets Advisory Council started, we were in a knockdown, drag out fight with highway superintendent at the time about sharrows.
Yeah.
We wouldn't allow sharrows anywhere, and we ended up putting them on down by the beach, because it's the only place he would do it, not that it mattered down there. And so you started from absolutely nothing on our street system to this kind of stuff. It's huge.
I don't want anyone to think that the new people, I can't speak for the other people, just myself, like, you know, just poo-poo everything you guys have done in the past. It's amazing, you know, the steps you've taken are amazing and the improvement is incredible. But, you know, I think there is just coming into it fresh, we're like, well, why is this, why is this? So, you know,
Yeah.
don't take it the wrong way when we're, you know, excited about,
and
Going
I
even
totally
further.
appreciate all of your energy, because that's
Yeah,
who I was in 2011, right? And I remember going to the city engineer at the time and saying, hey, what do you think about bike lane off Broadway? Never gonna happen. Too many vehicles coming from Port Ewan going to, you know, Woodstock. You know, there's too many vehicles, they're never gonna happen, you know? And so I appreciate the new energy and respect it, and I also learned through that it's so much more complicated than.
And I want to point out too that John, the city engineer, is a traffic engineer and he gets it. He's not, you don't have to fight him and knock him down to do stuff. The superintendent of public works, you know, that ends up doing the right thing, but he's trying to protect he's got to protect his workers and he's doing as well, but he's not go away and don't talk to me as his predecessors have been. So, you know, there's lots of other elements like that that'll make future stuff hopefully easier to do.
Yeah, and I want to say I really appreciate that too. And I guess what I'm coming from is like, you're saying, you know, we're talking about like the Dallas Outmeaners and all these people who are opposed to things. So I feel like on my end, I feel like the pro safety needs to be like that much stronger, you know, like those voices need to be amplified as much as possible.
it's a matter of
Push
determining
things that way. Yeah.
like which businesses are on your side and like remembering them to sort of come through the fight when you
Yeah.
need them, because I'm sure they exist too, you know, like everyone who's at Dallas Hot Wieners is also, you know, at the opposite side somewhere else that loves the bike lane and thinks it's gonna be a boon for their business, like the Peace Cafe. you know.
Yeah, we did do that. We did a tally of all the businesses and who supported and who didn't. There was a majority on that end were supportive of the project.
Sure.
So it's just, I think, and, you know, now that it's built, I'm watching it, how it functions. And I think we all are watching how it functions. And I think the more I watch how it functions, the more I realize like people's behavior is also really important. The engineering is not going to fix everything.
Don't make yourself crazy because it's not perfect.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that DOT, their main point of concern about the project, and I actually sort of share their concern, is that the unsignalized intersections, if you're turning into like the Bubble Laundromat or Railroad Avenue, there's an opportunity for conflict there between the bicyclists and the cars, and that doesn't make me nervous.
It's also why it was so upsetting when we had this crash, 2 days ago, 3 days ago?
Yeah.
Where somebody, my understanding, and I don't know, I haven't seen anything about
Absolutely
this.
crash report.
But my understanding is that I know it's a no right turn on red intersection.
Yeah.
And I believe, from what I was told, it was an illegal right turn on red that caused the crash.
Were you saying that there was the sign was up with the street light, right?
Yeah.
It's so funny because I put in a complaint about, at the YMCA intersection coming the other way, is that Prince Street across from the Y? That the no right turn on red sign is on this ground there.
Just a little back, and you can't, when you get to the.
Yeah.
You can't see it. But my response that I got was that it's within the guidelines.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that the solution would be to put it up at the light. So it's like, you can't, you're just not gonna see it no matter where you put it, it seems like. But I thought the same thing, that when you pull up to light, unless you notice, look for it, you're not gonna see it. Here's what you're right.
Yeah, I was at the scene when that happened.
Yeah.
The cyclist was being helped off the street to the bench at the time. She was in the cycle track heading east, which towards downtown. And
It's a counter to traffic.
So it wasn't the counter.
It was the counter,
it was the
counter
counter,
to traffic, coming towards us.
and she had lights on the bike, and two witnesses confirmed what she said, that she had the green light as a cyclist.
The bike, green bike, yeah.
Yeah. And the fellow in the
Range Rover.
Range Rover Discovery? I think it was a Discovery. He made the right turn into her and knocked her down. At the time, she was on an adrenaline rush. She didn't feel like she was badly hurt, but she was complaining about leg pain and there was damage to the bike. She explicitly asked that a ticket be issued. I don't know if it was. Multiple witnesses saw the crash and, backed her up. This guy made the turn on. I don't know where that landed, but,
I don't suppose you're interviewing him. Did you happen to hear, did he not see the sign? Was there?
he didn't say a word that I heard. He spent his entire time on the phone. I don't know who he was talking to. Did I send a picture around?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the guy, and,
Standing out
yeah,
there.
that was the driver. And
Certainly scary.
he was on the phone continuously.
What time was?
I think the collision was about 6:10. The woman works at the library, had just left work, and I think she was headed for the Y. She said she was going to an exercise class, and she decided she didn't need to do that after.
I think she called the mayor's radio show on Tuesday. It was very
It's tough. If people don't adhere to the vehicle traffic law.
Yeah. And now that was one of the concerns I had, way back when, was that drivers are not used to looking for counter bicycle traffic.
Well, the drivers aren't used to, if you're not looking for a posted sign to tell you whether or not you can make a right turn on red, whether it's a bicyclist or a pedestrian, and I'm more concerned about pedestrians, the same thing is gonna happen. I'm sorry about the bicyclists, but I mean, there are a lot of people who just get hit by cars because they're trying to cross the street.
Yeah.
But mostly it's, especially in cases like that, there's no, unless the signage is really clear, the average driver unfortunately is geared to turn right and brake. And if it's dark or at a time when the light is changing, I don't know, I'm not defending the driver. But if it was a clearly posted sign, they should have been aware.
Yeah.
Is there anything
It's a big sign.
that can be done? I posted, so I was reading up on the history of no turns on right turn on reds. I sent around the Wikipedia link, but there's a photo of a sign that said stop and then you can turn on red. Because a lot of people.
But here, don't turn on red.
Right. Yes, okay, sorry. So if he's not obeying that, doesn't matter.
You can't really see cars coming from the left.
And part of that could be changed with better sheeting on the signage. I mean, I don't know.
Reflection?
Yes, you can get better reflectivity on signage.
It's a brand new sign.
It doesn't matter. If you did not get a higher level of reflectivity, it still may not have been able to be seen, so. You know, I mean, those are some things that you can think about that would give a higher level of reflectivity that might have helped. I don't know, but if it was clearly posted, then this person, it was a moving violation regardless.
All right, I think we kind of beat that to death for the moment.
Yeah, that's the background.
Yeah. Folks don't mind, maybe we can switch the order a little bit, and let the chief step up instead of Brian.
Yeah, by all means, here.
Okay.
Thank you. From 10 Roaster House. Sorry. Beginning to- You want me to deliver on bike first? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I think it's two things. One was, what is the primary objectives of the bike patrols? And secondly, can we request certain, things of them, from, try to prevent, folks from doing things they shouldn't do.
Oh, absolutely. So for a while, we weren't in a good position, both staffing wise and equipment wise. That has changed. The mayor's investing in bike unit, both in staffing and equipment. We are getting new equipment. The Secretary Kingston Secretary through Bill Hassel, although it's limited anymore as far as what he's doing. He's working with us closely to identify replacements for our old 1990-something Cannondales, which still work. We went from, I think, we had a 1.8, we're down to 2. The rest of them are just being carved out. So Bill is working with us to try to get those bikes up. We are looking at e-bikes as an addition to the unit, something new, bit of a challenge. Really, the bike patrol course that the officers go to really they're not fit into that course anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how we actually use them. I'm thinking maybe more of a limited capacity, basically for the education enforcement component, because the primary use for the bike patrol officers is to serve the community. And I know it's a broad spectrum, but they're to address everything. We actually use them for many years by assigning them to certain zones and have them answer calls. They were responding unit who they'd have a car assigned to them, they put the bikes in the back of the car in the rack, drive it up, unload the bikes, patrol. If they made an arrest, they would call for a unit, or one of the officers would stay, grab the car, come back, and essentially handle everything themselves. We found it to be excellent for many purposes, including the arrests. When I tell you they are able to get around the city fast, they are. We've had great luck with them. The school is about 5 days, just a little like under 5 days, 30 some hours long. We usually try to run it here at Kingston. Last year we did it. We had 14 people attend it between the city of Kingston, Saugerties, and Cologne regions. So you might have seen them out there to do night rides and so on. So, but overall, when they go out there, they do function as part of the actual police patrol function. So we do put them out on overtime or on additional details. The officers, the lieutenants, told if there's more personnel than what's normally scheduled. So on every shift, there's minimum manning clauses. Day shift and nights are 5, 4 to 12 shift is 6. So say we have 8 officers working that shift, 2 of them then will get pulled for some community detail, whether it's a walking pedestrian kind of enforcement post or on the bikes. Like I said, with the limited equipment, not every shift has the availability of having officers that are trained to do the bikes yet. So it is a voluntary program. So, but so far it's been doing great.
Have you identified the officers who are actually going to be doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They've already gone through the school.
Oh, they are.
So we try every year. We try to get so inevitably we'll hire a number of officers after the school's out, right? Those have to get through the probationary period, and then at that point we'll put something out. Anybody interested in attending, and usually in the past we try to before COVID. We've done 2 years. We've done 2 years. Every 2 years the schools be held. It is kind of resource intense. We usually use the school resource officers to help run the school. It's usually held in the summer months. And we do open up to other agencies. But last year, we really did invest heavily on the staff part. The personnel that were assigned to the bike patrol, or at least bike certified, have moved up to different positions, detective, supervisor. or retired. So, but the difficulty, I think, for us is making sure that every shift has a certain number available. You know, clearly the midnight shift, although encouraged to put them out, has limited applications, right? The visibility component. So, but they've embraced it. I might leave something else out with that. I think pretty much.
As far as the bike patrol.
Yeah, as far as the bike stuff, I mean, it's,
We put them out on the 4 to 12 fairly frequently, just because it's a good time of day, basically. And we have a fair amount of bike officers on our shift. So once we get bikes up and running, mechanically sound and all that, and obviously the roads aren't slippery, we'll have them out there a little more often.
we actually did have an incident last year. I want to say it was about the August timeframe, end of July, beginning of August. And the only reason I wasn't aware of it because the woman sent me an email after the encounter. She wasn't happy. She did get ticketed for cutting the bike officers off at an intersection. Very similar situation. They have the body cameras on. They came to the intersection. They stopped. They proceeded through the intersection. She bailed. He did it right on red. This is what happened. And they said, I could hear the audience, whoa, what is that? You know, and so clearly they don't have the same, they have limited equipment. They still have the lights going on. But to be completely honest with you, the sirens don't go off. Much credit to the officers. They caught right up to this car at the next intersection and knocked on the window, gave her the look, pull over. They called for a patrol car because they don't have equipment that they can use for ticketing or issuing summons, and they issued her summons. And although she did not like getting the ticket, she did.
Does anyone like it?
Yeah, nobody likes getting it, right? So, and I think her email to me was more of, hey, I wish they would have just given me a warning, and it wasn't my fault, you know, that kind of thing. So they're wearing dark clothing, I didn't see them, whatever it might be. But they did issue the summons, so it's pretty effective. It just goes to reinforce that, you know, by having those officers fully appreciate the fact that they're on bikes and the safety that they have to make sure they enforce affects everybody. So,
I feel like the bike, I feel like this is a great, these officers will be in a perfect position to sort of be giving those tickets out for people parking in the buffer zones and inappropriately sort of parking in the bike lanes or whatever. Is that sort of going to be a focus for?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so part of the Be a Road Hero campaign, I know we've gone out there a couple of times. Anytime we are able to take pictures of the officers enforcing it, we do, so people can see it. But even the other night, I was coming to Broadway and someone was parked in the, I dare say, buffer zone, I guess, kind of thing. And there was an officer right up to the window. Whether or not they were handed, I couldn't tell what was happening at the time. Yeah, so I think they ran in, it was from the food places, and the guy just kind of pulled up, and because I could see he was holding the bag, what looked like food, I think it was near Kennedy. Then he had pulled up and parked across the lines, and pretty much all the cars spots were taken. So I think he just said, I'll just run in for a second. One of the officers pulled up.
Chief, do you know how many of those educational pamphlets have been given out? Do you have an idea?
Somewhat. A little bit over 200 to the last count, maybe
Yeah.
220-ish.
We can't get an accurate count only because the officers do keep them with them in their bags and cars.
Yeah.
We know it was put out there, and then they do put them down in blot notations when they are enforcing or educating. So,
Yeah, some of it's not, if they put it in the narrative,
Yeah.
it's our record system. If they put it in the narrative, it's very difficult to search them. If it's put in the type of call, like if I assign someone to go into this, we have a blotter that we can search and it gives us that number. And with that, I just wanted to add is, for the most part, what we've been doing is educational. The officers will hand them out, explain to them why they're doing it. This is what we're looking at. We're trying to make it safe for all this. There's probably been, my last count was 28 summonses issued for various offenses.
Can you clarify, is that specifically bike lane, is that buffer zone? Because you can have other summons, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking just Broadway, how do you?
Not primarily Broadway, but, and some was crosswalks, actually, one was myself at a crosswalk. I was driving up the road and flashes were on, someone crossing, car went through it. And
looped around. I was just out for whatever reason, I don't even remember, and it turned out that person was suspended, so shouldn't have been driving anyway. But,
I heard that happened to you too, going to the radio interview.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
and granted, we're gonna see it more often because we're not in marked police units. You know, driving up the road, we're gonna see it more often than the marked patrol car. But,
So, if there's somebody parked in the bike lane and we take a picture of it, like riding to work or whatever. With the license plate, can somebody be sent to that person in the mail?
So,
Or,
for a parking violation, it can be issued. But for a moving violation, you have to identify the driver.
right, so I'm saying is, so that even if me as a citizen sends you something with a picture of a car clearly parked at the bike lane, you can.
Yeah, again, we'd have to send an officer a parking enforcement.
Okay,
Right.
in
That's
the
what the
moment,
first, yeah.
in the moment, it can't be after the fact.
Yeah, no, the officer has to issue.
Oh, okay.
So you can like flag down a car and.
Yeah.
Next to it.
It's better just to call dispatch, it really is.
Oh, just call dispatch and say.
It's a car
so-
block.
Yeah,
Bike track, yeah.
I was just wondering, maybe you could send the educational piece to them. Maybe you don't send, maybe in the moment you don't give them a ticket, but.
Well, that's up to the officer, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of it is, to be honest with you, it's how receptive the driver is to it. You know, all of a sudden, like, I'll park where I want. Okay. You need to tell the judge that. That's how it
Yeah.
is. So, and that's really what sets this, I mean, we're going into it trying to get people to adhere to the rules of the road, be safe out there, right? We prefer to do it with a smile. But that doesn't always work.
So in your experience, are the folks that are parking in the bike lane or in the buffer zone, are they local or coming from
I
outside?
tell you that.
I would say a majority of them are probably.
I think most of the traffic dealings we have are local. That's usually what happens.
The
You know, I can tell you,
crosswalk, that was somebody who lived in Kingston.
yeah, I think from my experience, most of the time, when we get complaints, and more recently, what we're dealing with is people parking in handicap spots. So not usually in a lot of the housing complexes. Snyder City, some. And people are saying, well, car parked here, it's taking up my car. I need to have a handicap tag and I can't get in. And you know, well, the officer gets there and sure enough, it shouldn't be parked there. So they issue the summons. But we have seen an uptick of that, which is, I should say, either more people are calling, but we just haven't seen that routine patrol. So, but yeah, we're trying to adjust that.
Helen's got her hand up. I'm sorry, Helen. I don't know how long your hand has been up. My apologies.
That's okay. That's okay. No problem. I'm sorry. I'm just asking this. Hello, Chief Tinty. I'm just asking, as I'm here as liaison with the Conservation Advisory Council, but I'm asking this question as a private citizen. Is there going to be enforcement of, I mean, I don't even know if there's a law about bicycles riding without lights at night. I've seen a lot of bicycles that are just really hard to see at night. Are they required to have lights by law?
Yeah, there's certain safety equipment that they're required to have. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a blue gray program and the state police were in town helping us out with some stuff. And they were actually pulling cyclists over for no bell, for no ice on it, which in fairness created a lot of complaints about that. But as a result of that, Tom Polk was able to kind of put together a clinic and get the bikes there for, reviewed bikes for meeting safety requirements. And, it's no different than a tail light on a car. Clearly, if the officer sees it and they're aware of it, they'll stop the driver or the cyclist and have them address it that way. But there are requirements for reflective equipment and really audible devices. I think bell is actually the term they use in the VT. So it's funny because, we recreationally bike ride on trails and whatnot as a family. Usually Sunday mornings, and there's 12 or 15 of us, we're up a trail somewhere. And so the one morning I showed up with a box of bells for everyone, sitting there with a screwdriver. Like, what are you doing? That's the law. Let's go.
But yeah, so there is prospectively enforcement of lights at night. Is that what you're? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I was wondering if the light patrols are interacting with pedestrians and cyclists also, or is it primarily auto?
No, so they can address anything, really. I mean, for them, they're still police officers in every capacity. The bike officers are more apt, obviously, to view the road from a two-wheel or even, address those issues, right? Clearly, like this, when we cut them off, that affected them personally. Maybe if it was a vehicle, it would have been a different thing. But yes, when they go out there, I speak for the lieutenant, he's right there, but I know when he puts the team out, he'll say, "Oh, listen, this is what I need you guys focusing on. Here's every officer needs to do this," and you covered all, right? You say everything. There's nothing, we don't say go out there and hit drivers or hit cyclists, or you see a violation, address it. And I think that's the actual term we use in lineup, is address it. Leave it up to the officer to determine whether it's summons or a handout or just a stern talking to is all they need.
One of the things additionally, I think you had mentioned earlier was the education piece. The drivers of cars really do not know what to do. I'm not saying they know they're supposed to stop for pedestrians, they cross them. They, that kind of thing, but the, get the term now, the turn boxes.
Oh, the green box?
Yeah, the green boxes. I was just having a conversation with someone recently, had no idea.
Yeah, they had no idea.
Watch the video.
And I sent them a link to the video. It's about the
Yeah,
idea.
exactly.
I said, "Oh, this is great." I said, "Here's a website dedicated to all this, share it with your friends." Really, and it says it all, right? There's all that stuff on there. I said, you can't be better advertisement of what we're trying to do here, but that.
And I don't know what the answer is, but somewhere along the line, as a whole, there has to be some education. As not just, we go out and we do the thing with the Road Hero, and we try to educate. I don't know if it's at a community meeting somewhere, and you try to get as many people in as you can, get to educate them both the driving and bicyclist piece, but,
It's multi, drunk drive.
Yeah.
When I was younger, people drove under the influence of alcohol frequently.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I know my kids won't.
okay.
And I think that's a function of education. Throughout their lives, it's been, they won't move without a seatbelt, and they won't drive if they've had a drink. And I think that's an education, but.
But look how the state right, a generation, exactly what I was getting at. It's
But
going to
there's also significant amounts of money that has been put into that.
Yep.
And that, I think that's a challenge that our government underestimates how much money, our local government, council members, legislature, underestimates how much money it actually takes to do an education or promotional campaign that will be effective, sustained and effective over time. And
it still happens. If you look at the police blotter online, there's people getting arrested and high levels of intoxication. I am shocked sometimes with how people are, 0.0, right? That's the standard for high risk. There's people hitting 140, 180 behind the wheel. So they're still going to be out there. And I think, as the lieutenant mentioned, every time he goes to a meeting, he uses the opportunity to put a brochure, right, the Road Hero on the table to hope to generate discussion. But a lot of the meetings we go to involve community members that are already involved in everything we do. They're not the ones we have to reach out for, right? It's everybody else. It's the thousands of cars that travel up Broadway that have never looked at that website, that are just oblivious to it and go, what am I doing here? I got to turn left, I got to turn right, whatever it may be, right? So it's a challenge. It really is a big challenge to try to achieve.
well, that's why the engineering is important, right? Like Gustavo, I think you put that in one of your emails. I mean, the engineering is important, right? It is. It's like the bedrock foundation of safety. It's not it's not everything. And
they put the green box there for safety, and so they need it that way, right? But when people don't understand what that is, like, we were somewhat surprised to hear that today. By a person, to be honest, without saying name, who's a law enforcement related individual, right? Who Right, I mean, I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, come down the road, there's a green box there, and I'm like, let me have a seat. He's like, just tell me what it is. I have something better for you. So, but I think it is, I mean, you think about how many cars, how many people, how many bikes are going up and down Broadway, even to the, I don't think it was your shift, where they.
Was it wrong? Because if it was not.
No, there's a table properly on the other shift, surprisingly. And, but, the officer stopped someone on a bike who was on the sidewalk. And they kind of, I don't want to say, I had to cut him off, chief. I don't tell me to cut him off, but, he's riding the bike and he's clearly in the wrong, and the officers didn't have the brochure, didn't have the handout, didn't issue something, said, listen, you gotta hurt somebody. This is what's right here. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So.
Which is the goal.
Yeah, that's it. And hopefully that person will listen.
This conversation is reminding me of something I meant to ask for a long time and I'm forgetting about. Is there an opportunity for the school resource officers to give like safety, pedestrian safety training in the schools?
I imagine that the school would be very well.
I was just going to suggest that at the school level.
Yeah.
A lot of the negative responses we get are from teenagers, 18, 19, that are doing whatever they want on the bicycles, whatever, sidewalks, e-bikes going up the wrong way, anything imaginable. So it's just, maybe we can approach this one.
So, yeah, I can certainly pass that along to them, and I know they do have some availability of an audience during auditorium, conference stage when they can do it.
Are they in any of the elementary schools or is it junior high?
It's junior high.
I remember when I was a kid, we had in elementary school, at George Washington, we had bicycle safety training, a bicycle rodeo in the playground. And everybody in the school got it.
Yeah, there is a curriculum, but it's not core curriculum.
Yeah.
So it's optional to be used.
This goes to your point about it being the teenagers. You gotta get them young.
Yeah.
You gotta get them to understand the rules of the road as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist. And then ideally, if you still had driver's ed, you would get them there for the cars. But yeah, if there's something you can.
The positive side of that is all of our SROs are bicycle certified.
Yes, right.
I mean, I think part of the challenge is that we don't have a very well coordinated education campaign on the state level. So when we were looking into funding for just Kingston, it's be the hero campaign. I looked at a lot of other campaigns, effective campaigns, where they actually did some data collection and some research on how effective their campaign was. And it was drunk driving or don't text while driving. If you think about where you see those messages, they're on random, like you watch a YouTube video and it's the ad before you watch the YouTube video, or it's on the billboard. It's just like it permeates the environment everywhere that people go to see those messages, and to do that for pedestrians and bicyclists, from driver's ed to billboards, whatever, it costs a lot of money. And that's where we, as a state government, haven't prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we discussed the possibility, whether it's here at the county level, but about some change, and even like the 5-hour safety convention driving class, that it's required now, right? It has been for years. Why don't they make it your captive? You have to attend it. Is there any way to make it 8 and incorporate a little bit more detail? Or, we say from the cop's perspective, we've always said, how come there's not a small segment, half an hour, where you bring someone who has some law enforcement experience to some capacity, who's on the side of it, and teach those individuals how to, what to expect on a traffic stop, so they know. And that type. So because let's face it, it can be extremely traumatic. Your past experience, right? A cop comes up to the window, they would not, but lights the registration, or you see the lights behind you. What do? Do I pull over right away? Do I pull over to a safe area? And unless the driver, the guardian or the driver who's teaching you how to do this, they just don't cover it, right? And you can go to Walmart and buy a bike and start riding. No one's showing, as long as you can pedal, no one's telling you you have to meet certain rules of the road. That's not part of it. At least some of these small, mom and pop bike shops can go over some of that with you, or at least make sure you have the proper equipment. Hey, listen, just so you know, if you're riding down the road, you need a bell, you need a reflector, you need a battery, or whatever it might be. But we don't have that. The only thing we have that currently with is cars, right? And obviously, for obvious reasons, I don't need to say that, but that's an issue, right? Clearly, that's something that I agree 100% is education. How do we make it?
Pervasive.
Right.
And on the issue of education, Chief Tinsley's a member of the Traffic Safety Board. The Traffic Safety Board is county board. And we are starting to crack that nut of education. We have a small amount of money and we're forming a subcommittee to begin to take a bite out of it. It's a broad topic and there are different subtopics to focus on. Pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, motorist responsibilities at a crosswalk, DWI, et cetera, it goes on. And the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee does have a strategic manual that identifies what the focus areas should be, and that's a data-driven process. We're just beginning to scratch the surface. I reached out to our regional representative from GTSC today to see if she can provide guidance. She's taking it up the flagpole. This is going to be an ongoing discussion, but the need is there. We're recognizing it. I'm hoping that if we can establish a small foundation of success and a campaign that's building on the work that the city has already taken through the Road Hero campaign, that we can find additional funding to broaden it. I've been involved with other public education campaigns, not traffic safety related, that did just that. Once they saw that, oh yeah, this works, that I like this, it will become easier to get additional funding. But we have to start somewhere, and I'm hoping this year will be a good year for the traffic safety committee in that regard.
What's the grant, like the maximum grant that you can get from the government?
The next round will be announced this month, if it hasn't been announced yet already. It's usually announced in March, I don't know, but we'll know soon. Those numbers are all increased.
Oh, they have.
Over previous years, because they're drawing from federal dollars as well, and those federal dollars increase through the Surface Transportation Authorization Act.
I was just thinking that it might be something that this council would advocate for on the state level, if there were ever an opportunity to increase that funding amount.
I would love to see a coordinated campaign where
Like statewide.
pick your topic, let's just say crosswalk enforcement. That's my pet issue. And if we could do billboards and then say there's a targeted enforcement during the week of June, I'm sure there's already an established calendar period in the state where they do this anyway. To work with the city and other municipalities, it's not just City of Kingston, to coordinate some sort of outreach approach, that would be ideal for me. That would be a big success. But we're a long ways from doing
Yeah, the
it.
model exists for speeding. We used to
Right.
do target enforcement on 9, for example. We educate for 2 weeks, enforce for 2 weeks, get the same number of speeding tickets every year, which was frustrating. The idea being that you'll learn, if you speed here next week, we're gonna ticket you. And they do.
Yeah. One thing that I was thinking about is we're gonna have a lot of police on the bikes, like racking miles. I think at some point that'd be useful to kind of like get feedback from them in terms of like areas that are problematic, that this council can help improve, like crossings or, I think that having that data from them might be very useful.
No, absolutely, we can do that.
And another issue, I don't know if this is impossible, but at least where I live on the time, I see a lot of people parking their cars in a way that they block the sidewalk.
Right.
I report that, but I think sometimes they do it like after 5, so there's like hard to, I guess the person that does the ticketing office. So I'm guessing it's something that the bike patrol can include to the things that.
Oh, and so we're in regulatory rules. If they come across it, if to be completely honest, and I always know I am, okay, but there's officers that aren't looking for that. it's just the way it is, right? They're looking for bigger stuff, or they have a mission in mind, and so, you know, I just got the other day, the officer just came through, the car's still parked in the handicap. They weren't sent there on that call. They were there, routine patrol, they're going around, I gotta make sure I go around here, and then they leave without even thinking, oh, there's one. So I always encourage the residents to call and identify the situation. They're parked in front of 75 garbage, whatever it may be, there it is, so. But yeah, they always do that. If they see it, we have, like a better term, we have ticket writing machines down there. There are officers that enjoy writing summonses. I'm like,
No.
okay, there it is, right? So.
That's how we decide who to send where.
Yeah. So, you know, when we said we need to create a team for this, we're gonna, you know, get out there, we're gonna change Broadway and make sure it's safe. You know, there were names on that list that we knew we were gonna have to go, listen, just so you know, we're gonna try to educate first. And this was.
It was like pulling the reins.
Right, but once I educated them, right, I'm like, hold on, and if you come across them again, you know, I'm like, so they're out there, right? They're out there. And, you know, our stats are showing that they're increasing the number of summonses every month and the car stops as well. So what we're trying to keep in mind that we are community policing driven. So the ticket you issued today may come back in the form of some other response later. Why should I help you with what's going on when you wrote me the ticket, right? So we have to be careful with that, knowing that the majority of the population, whether the people that we do pull over, stop, or talk to, are residents, right? They're not, you know, they're not from Tennessee, passing through the city, have no idea what that green box is, right? Think about that. So, like I said, very surprised sometimes that with all the changes that have occurred, that there's still people who live in the city and don't understand, you know, that flashing LED on the side, what that means anymore. So I think it works, it's great, but yeah, I'm not surprised by that. But yes, to answer your question.
Speaking of tickets, a little off topic, but that accident you were speaking of earlier, the motorist was issued a ticket. Was traffic safety.
We really have, I mean, I don't want to say it because I didn't know 100%, but I'm thinking, man, our officers know what we're doing. So, and even if they don't, the supervisors know. We meet with them, we meet with yours regularly. I meet with lieutenants every week, and it is a recurring, resounding message every week. And remember, when you go out there, make sure they're, you know, if it's nice out, try to get them on foot. Right? That doesn't always work depending on staffing, but we encourage that, especially since the council gave us dedicated monies towards the enforcement. And so, although, you know, the numbers that the lieutenant gave you are mostly the Broadway enforcement, or the Broadway part of it, we do look at other places, Hurley, Wilbur Avenue, you know, they are encouraged to go all around the city to do that, but clearly because of the incidents that have occurred, they're focused on that. Yeah, in the old days, we just hammered people. We just did. There was no education. There was no, we get up there, which we license registration. And, you know, it's not, hey, you know, you missed the stop sign back there. That wasn't the way policing was done, you know. But we also didn't call it community policing either. You know, so.
They were brutal on the students at the high school, with the cars back in the day.
We had one officer assigned for a while, and just assigned essentially a day shift, but that he was pulled off the regular squad and assigned to the traffic car. He had his own car, and that's what he did. That's all he did, was look around every day. Monday through Friday, just that's it. We just don't have that level of staff anymore. We had an officer assigned to the Uptown post, and he lived up there. He walked from his apartment down the stairs, walk uptown Kingston, and everybody loved him. He did a great job. Any complaints, store owners, people, parking, it was great. We don't have that luxury anymore.
So how are staffing levels? You said, you know that they've historically, been kind of bad lately, but you just kind of indicated they're better now?
They are better, much better. So we recently we have 6 vacancies, 4 of which we just offered conditional employment pending further exams. And that's medical, psychological, and polygraph. So 4, we're currently in that testing phase for those. There's 2 other vacancies that we hope to interview this March meeting, or actually next week, to interview them. So, so staffing level is coming up. We still have a couple of officers that have long-term injury, but much better. The problem we're seeing now, much better. I just want to leave that much better. The candidates that we're hiring, more than half don't have any police training. So now we hire them and scheduling them to go to the police academy, which starts in July. So we hire for, essentially, to put it out there, I say, to be honest, to put it out there, to hire them now, today, just costs the city money as far as salary goes. The benefit is when they count for something for us. So once we get closer to July, we'll give an appointment date. They'll start the police academy, graduate in December, and beginning of December, go through the field training, and essentially then at that point they'll count, the term we use, sometime in the February and March timeframe next year. So there is that. Now, there's other candidates that have come to us, like the first 2 we hired, that are already police officers part-time somewhere else. They just have to go under the 3 exams in the conditional credit, and then they get put to a car on the road, and they just have to complete the field training. So their time period is shortened by a lot. I mean, there would be, I think we still adhere to the 12 weeks, but usually after 6 weeks, they count. So I think that's a big bonus for us. But it's just.
What kind of background check do the people with the prior police training get, and what is the demographics that you're getting?
So they get the same.
Same background.
Our standard is the same.
But I mean, do you check for what their?
Why they aren't being a police officer where they were before?
That's,
They're coming from a part-time agency, where they aren't offered full-time, that's one of them.
Right, yeah. The 2 that we hired here are currently part-time somewhere else. But when we do a background investigation, they sign a release and a waiver. We get everything. We get the background packet that was completed by the other agency. We get the personnel files, we get the disciplinary files, we get everything. Yeah, and, again, I like the fact that Kingston uses a polygraph, to determine honesty, because the questions that are asked of police officers are the same basic questions asked of non-police officers, but there's more. So for instance, I'll just throw this out there. If you come to us as a sworn police officer, been through your training, you're somewhere else, one of the questions that the polygraph examiner will ask you and determine whether or not you're being honest is, have you ever struck a prisoner out of anger? Have you ever taken evidence? Those questions would apply to a civilian, right? So we do drill down into that. The psychological testing is standardized, it's fit for duty. We have a written exam, and then on top of that, they actually meet with a license.
And what about the demographics of what you're getting? Are you actively looking for? The last time I looked at the Kingston Police Department, it was fairly bland.
Yes.
So are you looking or actively recruiting for people that aren't white?
Correct. So that's the one thing we have as a limitation. Our recruitment effort is, I'll put it up against anybody, we have done incredible recruitment. Unfortunately, we don't get people that want to be cops anymore, not just here, anywhere. We're just not getting the numbers. The state police just held their exam, they're gonna have to hold the number. We just held our exam in September, 26 people sat for the exam, 26.
What was
Yes.
in the past?
What's that?
What was it in the past?
Near 400.
300, 400?
3 and change went up to almost 4.
Yeah. That's true.
And even closer, like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
When
when
I
I
got to
first,
college, we used
two places.
300 and something.
Yeah, when I became chief in 2011, we held the exam that year. And they had the cafeteria at the SUNY Ulster campus and 2 other rooms that we just could not fit people. But again, with everything we've been through and some of the changes, and we just are not being, I think it's changing. I think, Lieutenant is also the director of our police academy, and he sees the number increasing to those individuals that want to be cops. They'll put themselves through the academy. But it's difficult. It's difficult. And as far as of color, that is a challenge in and of itself, because in speaking to them, they have, to, in many cases, they have to make a decision to alienate themselves from those individuals that they grew up with. Because there is still strong, whether the one officer said, I may be black in skin color, but as soon as I put that uniform on, they look at me as a cop, no longer one of the community members. And I have to make, we had one interview with the local, I apologize when I say.
All right, I hear what you're saying. I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'm not arguing. I'm just saying, yeah, obviously we have to do better. And I do think that, you know, of course, everybody thinks that, quite frankly, regardless of who you are, once you put on a uniform, you're blue, period. So it really has nothing to do, because I do think white people, once you say you're a cop, you're alienating yourself from a lot of people that you like.
There's no doubt about it.
So using that to say that that's why people of color don't do it, I'm not feeling it, but I'm not saying they're trying. I understand you're trying.
They're telling me this.
Yeah, I'm not saying
that.
that. Once again, I'd say you're trying. So, okay.
We're trying. We're doing everything we can to do everything we can. We go out to the neighborhoods. We've tried, there's agencies that are doing sign-on bonuses. They're just not getting individuals to become police officers. 26 people took the exam. You know, in fairness, and I'm not trying to create a, you have to give up your weekends, you work holidays, you work in midnights. In our shift, because it's based on seniority, 6 or 7 years before you're able to see another sign off that shift. Why? For what? 80,000? On a good day, $80,000, I'm gonna miss my family? Come on. And we throw it out there, and sometimes people don't understand where we're going with it, but it's true, right? I have officers on the midnight shift that have been there for 7 years. 7 years. They have to get up at 10:30 at night, go to work, come home at 7.
Hey, I'm a former public service employee. I get you.
I know my family, one of my family members have said to me, unfortunately, that for them, it's more important to be home with their family on the weekends and at nights than to serve in a capacity as a police officer. So when I say to them, it's a good job, it's honorable, you get to serve the community, you know, make change, and they're like, it's not, no. And they're not wrong. They're 100% right. The one challenge, I keep using the word, but when and I'll speak for lieutenants right there, when we came on, you worked. The job came first. When the boss called and says, I need you in, you went in. Today, you know, that's not the case. When you interview individuals, it's like, this other place has the benefit of shift changes, right? They're not permanent seniority assigned places. That works better for me. Or they rotate. We work a 7-day, 3-day off, 7-day on, 3-day off, 7-day on, 4-day off schedule. 7 days in a row. A lot of people don't want that. So they'll say, I'd rather work at 5-2, or some places like the sheriff's office does 12-hour shifts instead of 8. So they're able to for the job. But I gotta tell you, I don't think we can do any more for recruitment. I mean, we are all competing when we go to these meetings. Every law enforcement official says we're competing for the same candidate. You know, what can we offer in Kingston that will entice people not become a sheriff's deputy or trooper or work for the town or whatever? And it's a challenge, it really is. And those individuals that are qualified can pick and choose where they want to go. It's difficult. I don't mean to come across as, but it's a struggle. And if I sound aggravated or frustrated, I am. I tell you, our officers are out there. We just had squad meetings. And I said to each and every one of you has a responsibility to at least convince one person out there to take our exam. Just one. You know, whether or not they go past it, just sit for the exam, right? Get the numbers up and let them think about it, right? So, but it's not always easy. It wasn't the old days. Right? The old days, you just turn people over. Oh, you got a traffic ticket, you're not qualified. Now we're like, got 10 traffic tickets. How old were you when that happened?
And even so, as far as recruitment too, last year we ran Proud Academy, which was not well attended, but we ended only with 7 people that did the entire thing, 4 of which are now police officers. So that not necessarily in case, but
And that was multi-week. We trained them physically, sit-ups, push-ups, and a mile and a half is the standard today. So they have to pass it at their age. And so at that point, we're PTing them every other week, it actually was, every other week. And the times that after they PT, we bring them to a classroom and we're essentially teaching them how to take a civil service exam. What to look for, how to go from 4 questions or answer them to 2, how to knock that out, what's the reason, if you have to guess, use the reasonable guess. And, you know, I think we were successful because the ones that did take the exam all passed it. But again, it's like I talked about before, they're the individuals that are hungry. They've already made the determination, I want to be a public servant. Those aren't always the ones, we want others to come over. And it's a challenge.
And it's also a resource struggle, because we can get them there. Now I have to get instructors myself, and whoever else to be there as well on the Saturday.
But this last group that we just hired, we have 2 Hispanic officers,
Yeah, it's just
1 local, black male, and this next group, there's 4. So we're trying.
Yeah, 3 of the 4 that we just hired.
Yeah. And we're looking, because of the growing Hispanic community in Kingston, we're also looking for that. So one of the officers is bilingual. So that's important to have as well, right? We understand.
I think last year was also very good in Spanish.
Yes.
Trying to recruit
Yes.
people from the South.
Yeah. Yeah, we tell them as well. We tell those officers, tell all your friends, come on, let's go, right? Come on. Because I think on that side of it, what I'm being told is that there's apprehension. They're not sure whether or not they can qualify. You know, hey, I'm not a citizen yet, I'm working on it. Can I get there? And yeah, we tell them all the time, yeah, you can. Take the exam, we'll go from there. So.
We also have local people, 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, that chose to work outside of this area because they don't want to be involved in the neighborhood. And my recruitment for the academy is just telling you only test the biggest case.
Yeah. That's true. I hear them say that all the time. Yeah. Yeah, there was one point where, you know, for the students, we don't hire part-time officers. We are only full-time civil service testing. So there's other agencies, in fact, every other county agency or agency in the county except for cities that can offer part-time employment and to some degree bypass the requirements of the civil service exam. So they're able to do that. My apologies, like. I think that when you know, and that's why they're already part-time, it's easier to schedule. So the sheriff, the other town officer, the chiefs will say, don't take my guy. Right at graduation, don't take my guy. Tinty, don't take my guy. I'm like, hey, and I slipped my card in the handshake, hey, congratulations on the graduation.
We just won that battle.
Yeah, we did, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, so it's, you know, pay only goes a certain distance when it comes to law enforcement. You know, especially when all the agencies are about the same financially, right? I mean, in fair, you know, the mayor was very supportive of this last contract. He met the needs of the union, which is great. But we had an officer, not our officer, come in to an interview, get recommended by the command staff, move on to the police commission, who is the civilian review board that essentially hires them, makes a determination, hire them, and then came in and said, you know, I said, hey, congratulations, you start here as an initial employment. He said, yeah, I'll copy the contract because, and they'll look and say, yeah, actually, I can do better someplace else. Thank you for the opportunity, Chief. And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming, John. It's very informative.
Yeah, I apologize. If there's anything that you ever need from myself or Lieutenant, please don't hesitate to ask. As far as recommendations you have, just send it down. And I mean, really, just anything you can do. So.
When you say call dispatch, is that 911?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
We're running into that problem now.
Yeah.
Most people will say, it's not really an emergency.
Right.
Right.
Waiting for a thing they call 911.
So, it's the 331-1671 number.
Okay.
So we're running into this now, it won't take too much time, but, KFD now has the mobile mental health unit. With the ambulance. You know, one of the things is that sometimes they'll call the police department, because they're like, it's not really 911, but the person's on the sidewalk, they're crying, looks like very upset, in crisis, and so they'll call us, and then we have to call back the county to dispatch KFD, where, you know, we're trying to encourage, I think Orange County may have a 311 number now that is specifically towards people in crisis. And what they're looking to do is reduce the number of times police officers.
811?
It might be that.
311, I think, is the city.
Oh, the information.
I think it's 811 is the
That might be what
global
it is.
mental health. Yeah.
But it's not around here. I think it's Orange County is what they're doing. And when I was speaking to one of the coordinators, they work in conjunction with the 911 center. So if they do call 811 and this person crying, carrying on in crisis, and they have a knife, then they swing it over to 911 who dispatches police and so on. So
Okay.
It's definitely best to call it a
1671
number.
number.
But if you call 911, they're gonna transfer.
331-1671?
Yes,
331-1671?
yes.
For emergencies, call 911. We say for anything else, that'll get you the dispatcher.
Still know the number of my hometown for
Is that right?
dispatch 2424.
And if you Google Kingston Police Department, that's the number that's on the website.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, there's actually, we were just talking about that at the command staff meeting now. I get the Google stats, right? So I share with them, and I'm like, look at this. I said, 500 people called us by clicking on that call button, right? That's pretty impressive to see how it's on there. So we do have a couple of bad reviews, 1-star reviews. I think they were complaining about the food when they were locked up in the cell, but we don't have a choice. It's hamburger and coffee, right? That's it.
It's
So,
hamburger.
again, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, we saved 4 minutes.
That's all right, I can be brief, and because it's not really my area of expertise, but Emily asked me to provide a little background on the safe systems approach, so we can defer this to another meeting and discuss it further, but I do have a short handout that I'll share with everyone. Let me just say a few points. In January of 22, Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg announced in the National Roadway Safety Strategy that the U.S. Department of Transportation would be embracing the safe systems approach. This was a pretty earth-shattering announcement as far as announcements in the Department of Transportation go, because it's a major sea change to see it being so fully embraced at that level. Vision Zero emanates from the safe systems approach. It's incorporated, it's a part of it. If you're familiar with what Vision Zero is, it's the goal of zero death and serious injuries on our roadways. That should be the only goal. But there's other elements to the safe systems approach that are shown very well through the illustration. And the whole concept is that it's a series of redundant approaches that if we can be successful doing all of these different elements to ensure safety on our highways, then we will be successful overall, and we will have a reduction. So
All roads or?
yeah, it's, I mean, the safe systems approach is for all roadways throughout the United States. But, and bearing in mind that the US DOT's hand does not touch every single way in terms of regulation and enforcement. How does this get enforced? That's a good question. I mean, as a bureaucrat, this was released in January 22. That was yesterday from my perspective. We're all still trying to understand what the implications are. But what this goes hand in hand with is keep in mind that we just passed the bipartisan infrastructure law in November of 21. There are a number of new federal funding sources. Some of these programs have yet to have the rules written for them. So we don't even know how exactly they'll be implemented at the local level in the Kingstons, in the Ulster counties of the world. So the idea as the framework generally works is there is money behind influencing or rather for getting the safe system approach implemented. And that is through programs such as the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the Transportation Alternatives Program, the Safe Streets program, which is a new one, and a multitude of other programs. The new ones, again, only a few of them have been rolled out so far in terms of grant opportunities. It's typically the biggest metropolitan areas are the first to grab the big ticket projects, but eventually in smaller urbanized areas, our office, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, will assist and become more familiar with what constitutes a successful project, and will start to learn how to capture some of those funds to implement them. But the idea is that all US DOT funded projects will have a safe system element that you should have to show that, yes, this checks the box, this project will meet the safe system approach in some way. That's not necessarily going to be the only criteria or the maximum criteria, but it's a consideration for all the funding going forward. So I'm still learning a lot. I've got a lot to learn about it, but the last thing I'll say is this continues a progression that started at the 3 E's from many years ago, which is still the fundamental component of safe streets, which is engineering, education, and enforcement. And then that changed when the Safer to School program was developed by Federal Highway Administration. They added 2 additional E's to the 3 E approach to include evaluation and encouragement. And encouragement to walk to school, encourage community people to do a walking school bus, things of that nature. So now we've continued along the paradigm to the safe systems. So that is how we've gotten here. I've reached out to the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee and to my Federal Highway Administration liaison. They don't have anything in addition to offer than what is already on the FHWA website. There's a lot more information if you follow. You can just Google it. I just pulled this off the FHWA webpage. So I would like to locally on the Traffic Safety Board webpage start to incorporate at a minimum this document and sort of integrate it into our own framework, but I'm not sure how I do that yet. And of course, we work under consensus, so I really need to have the consensus of the board before we start to put up these types of materials. But I'd like to try to get it more out there in the months ahead.
This stuff incorporated into the new zoning?
Roseberry Quinn asked that same very question. I mean, zoning is land use.
Right, and
Safe
systems
systems
have
is streets.
standards about streets. And the standards in there about streets talk about operating speed, design speed. So they talk about some street features for new streets, but to be very practical about it, there's not going to be a lot of new streets.
Right.
But there are some principles in there that would apply to existing streets. So so the answer I would say is yes.
Right.
They've thought about it. Prior zoning, as Brian points out, prior zoning had silent on streets or, whatever.
And yet, I guess the final thing is that all of this is in reaction to the unbelievable increase in roadway deaths that we've seen in the United States, far out of proportion to other industrialized nations. And it doesn't appear to be dropping. This was a pandemic-related spike in deaths and serious injuries that took everybody by surprise, that we're still trying to understand. And it was quick to rise and it's very slow to fall, these rates. So this was, the need was seen by the department to do something. This was one of the first steps.
I don't know if it was raised in email or in person, but Robin suggested possibly an exercise. How a project is
You know, we did a little bit of that today with Christian. We talked about, you know,
I was
we
wondering,
think about that.
if this is something we want to do, like, the agenda item at our regular meeting,
Yeah.
or have a separate meeting for it to not go off track of the other things that we're working on.
I would suggest a separate meeting where together we could develop. At one time, we used to train our class one leaders, and so there's pieces of that that will be very useful for people to understand. And it's a balancing, you know, the issues of the design and squad leaders was, okay, here's your problem, you know, here are the stakeholders, and, you know, what do you do? So it would take some time to dig some of that up, I think it might be worthwhile, but I do think it should be standard.
Is this like an hour thing, 2 hours?
You do it an hour. You do it an hour.
Well, I'm sorry, what is it? It's to
It's a
explain.
design exercise.
Oh, okay.
All the competing agendas.
Here's the
so
problem,
forth rolled in.
here's the stakeholders, here's the agenda, here's the, you know, geography, of people, you know.
The money,
the money, all the things that a designer has to think about to get to a project. Right.
Would this be a public meeting?
Would it be a public meeting? Well,
I love the idea of allowing the common council to go through that exercise.
how many of the common council came to the street? Any?
Barbara came in and then went out,
Okay,
but she came in.
good.
I don't know how many people watched it, you know, remote, I can't tell who was watching.
Was it a success? I'm sorry, this is off agenda.
I think it was a success.
how many people were, I attended, how many people were online?
Not many. It was mostly everybody.
Okay.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was, you know, it's always hard to gauge, because, I mean, I've been talking about complete streets for going on 15, 20 years. Like, you guys don't know this already? But I think, you know, whenever any opportunity to get the message out is useful. I had said specifically to Emily, can we compel the planning board members to attend? Because and of course, it's hard to, you can't compel anyone to do anything. And I know Kristen ran up against that going on 10 years ago when we had, what's his name from Alto?
Yeah, you know, we actually had quite a few planning board attendants that one. I think they got credits. We created it so that they could get credits.
That's one way of doing it.
And that is easily done, just the common council, I think, just needs to pass
Right.
a resolution to allow any training, you can receive credits.
Yeah. So I think that's how we got planning board members back then.
Continuing education, which is,
Yeah, that might be.
that might be the tip.
Yeah, just continuing ed. I think it would be wonderful to create some opportunity for compassion. I mean, you know, it is, it'd be nice if planning board or common council members or members of the general public understand what civil service employee has to do, has to balance. I mean, you know, we're gonna avoid what
Oh, right, no,
the negative commentary, but that was, you know, a big struggle.
Yep.
Is explaining to folks what you have to balance with DOT or you know.
there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people in it.
Yeah.
Not
I
every.
guess we could, I don't know who the player should be here to put something like this together. We need support from the city, for one thing. We would need our trainer to, you know, come up with a program.
First step, why don't we leave it, then I'll see if I can come up with as far as a 1 hour program.
Okay.
So we can take.
Okay. I'd be interested in.
Would it be something like you present a design challenge and then people break into groups or something?
Well, or you do, yeah, or you can do it as a whole group, or it depends on how to get it.
It'd be interesting to see if folks broke into different groups, like what kinds of different designs would approach. Would they all create the same design or would they all be really different? You know, with the same ingredients.
Is there a right answer or not?
Yeah.
You know.
As part of our Creating Healthy Schools and Communities grant, we get a lot of training. And we watched a webinar, blanking on the name of the organization, but it was engineers that do a lot of creative public outreach. And they would do design sessions with kind of almost use materials to get people to think creatively. So this training was for people who are encouraging complete streets in different municipalities. It was lovely. I love that idea of this at the end of the letter, they said, don't use Legos, that's too prescriptive. It was like, use feathers, pom-pom balls, all these things. But it felt so far away. I needed a step in between. So what you're talking about, I think, is that step in between, that idea of how does this process work, but it's not pie in the sky.
Right.
Achieving,
Right.
it's sort of like that in between step.
It's what we used to use is we use, an intersection or, that wasn't operating. Bridge, but very easy.
A great example that we always continue to use, one of Bob's former coworkers, Senator Jobson, was working as a project manager at Stone Ridge to do a sidewalk project. Everyone said, we want blue stone sidewalks. And Sandra said, we don't have money for blue stone sidewalks. I said, well, too bad, we're an historic community. So what she did was, she had 2 sets of strings. She said, these are the concrete sidewalks. They're the long ones. And these short ones are the bluestone sidewalks. And they represented the linear feet that they could construct. And I think they went with bluestone. We continue, I think, as I recall, we continue to get inquiries from the town about how to extend their sidewalks out to the shopping center. But it's when you can show people the trade-offs and the restraints that we're working with, that the municipalities are constantly working with. It might be
Sandra would do the training. Much as well.
So I guess we'll revisit this in 2 months.
Yeah, we just talk
Next one, the sidewalks.
I'm not aware of any administration items, announcements. We've got the bicycle master plan, and we've been working on for a year.
It's Monday.
I love it.
I just got the draft plan during this meeting, and I will try to post it tonight. So I'm guessing that some of you here have been waiting to see that draft. You have asked a question?
No, I was gonna say, yeah. It's something you have read. I read something recently.
You were on the pack.
Oh.
You were on the. You had a preview.
I didn't get to finish, so I'm gonna finish with public.
Oh, you did?
Commentary. Yeah, I went up to like a certain page and then I couldn't get the rest.
By the way, PAC members, 100 different comments that the consultants had to do in 2 days. So.
Good, I think it was good that I read
Yeah,
mine.
that's- so, I say that to say we were very engaged public advisory committee, which is fabulous. And also that's why I say meet till Wednesday to get it up on the website. Please, if you know anyone who's interested, please share it with them. We'd love them to come to a public meeting, because that's a great way to try to get information across, but really, the next month, comments will be open. So anyone can look at the draft and submit us. We'd love to hear their comments before we submit it to the common council. Ideally, we would get a draft that the community is in favor of before we ask the common council to vote on it. So please share it. I think I added to the agenda this official, or maybe, I think John, you suggested I bring up the bicycle and pedestrian count, so you guys have talked about evaluation. So I just want to mention that in May, there will be a volunteer opportunity for people to sit out and do a pedestrian bicycle count. We do these for 5 years. We do it at 4 locations on Broadway. If you are I'm going to say this very affectionately as one of the group, if you are a transportation nerd, I find it very interesting to sit there and see how people use the space. So, details. What's that?
Do you know what it means?
It's usually the second week in May. It's usually the Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. But I don't have those dates yet because this last year and this year, we do it in conjunction with our Creating Healthy Schools and Communities Growing Up. So there's a little bit more coordination involved in this year. So I will absolutely email you all about that opportunity. I wanted to also mention the Earth Fair. So we are going to do a bike valet. A bike valet is basically we set up a table with some temporary bike racks and we ask people to sit for 2 hours watching the bikes. I usually put out transportation information, so it's some of the materials I had out at the Complete Streets training. And in the past, I would have sent this out to Bike Friendly Kingston, but I just want to say this is the most active group that I see right now. So I'm starting with you all to maybe see if you're interested in supporting Bike Ballet for Thursday. Email me, or I'll send out, when I do the meeting recap, I'll put this in. That's it.
Any other announcements? I guess we motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion. Second.
The notice here is a, what do you call it? A chamber mixer. I suspect you could blend in and get a glass of wine.
Right.